As I was rewatching Steven Universe recently, in the long winter nights, tinged with swirling winds that we get here back in Colorado, where I am on winter break, I thought about the show's astute and nuanced treatment of relationships. It is a remarkably compassionate and empathetic show when it comes to relationships. While one can criticize the sociological or political aspects of the show, which don't quite come off as well as they could have, in part because they weren't the show's major focus, the personal relationships that are the show's focus are extremely grounded and extremely heartfelt and thoughtful. Now, what is most distinctive about Steven Universe is fusion, which is the kind of metaphor that is brilliant and astute because it is not just a metaphor for one thing. There is a sexual element to it, but it's not just or even primarily sexual. It is about closeness, it is about intimacy, it is above all else about being in a relationship, about having that process of two singular consciousnesses becoming one, while also still retaining some element of individuality. Fusion can be beautiful and a symbol of a very strong and solid relationship, as we see with Garnet. It can be exciting and experimental, like we see with Connie and Steven in their first time. Or it can be brutal and callous, like we see with Lapis and Jasper, which is the clearest allegory the show provides for an abusive relationship. But fusion is not only enough. While there is great symbolic and metaphorical value in fusion, it does not solve all the problems of a relationship. It does not make the relationship perfect. The best kinds of relationships, according to Aristotle, are those that are based on the good, in urging what is best for the self and others. This is as opposed to lesser kinds of relationships, which are based on these lesser goals, such as only initial passion and enthusiasm, or even worse, for a sense of mere ruthless gain and exploitation. The good for Aristotle is that which is valuable in of itself, that which is not the means to an end, the means to achieve something greater, but the great thing that other processes and other ideas and other feelings are ultimately in service of. In a relationship, this means looking out for what is best for the other person as much as for oneself. Viewing that bond as a bond created in pursuit of all that is beyond the self-indulgent, beyond the capricious, beyond the merely fleeting and evanescent. Sartre and de Beauvoir talk about, famously, the object. Now, objectification is one of those words that came from the Academy and has diffused into popular consciousness in a way that loses a lot of nuances. To a certain extent, for Beauvoir and Sartre, objectification is inevitable, because the other can only ever be an object to you. That may sound bleak, but what they merely mean is that the only person who has access to your interiority, to your consciousness, to your free will, is you. You are the only person that can see yourself in all your potentiality. The other person is other. They are not someone that you can control, not in the same way that you can control yourself. There is always a distance between you and them. Fusion, to a certain extent, collapses that distance. It promotes a sort of ideal. The ideal of the merger of these two consciousnesses, these two wills, these two different subjectivities. There is, in a way, a sense of getting beyond the innate separation that Sartre and de Beauvoir see between the self and others. But ultimately, fusion is not a panacea, nor is it ultimately, in the show's vision, a requirement for an ultimately healthy and prosperous relationship. One of the show's most beautiful and tender portraits of love is between Rose Quartz and Greg. It is a relationship that is flawed. It is a relationship that is based on the conscious choice to turn away from expectations, turn away from existing structures of power and responsibility. And this relationship is also in some ways innately unbalanced. Rose Quartz is one of the most powerful beings in this world, while Greg is just Greg, a washed-up musician. And yet, while that matters to a certain extent, it does not prevent the relationship between the two of them from becoming incredibly strong and incredibly enduring. There is no doubt that these two have a deep and lasting love for each other, even though they can't fuse. They can't engage in what is to the Gems, and arguably to Steven Universe as a whole, this ultimate merging of consciousnesses, of wills. Relationships need to be built in this show. They are not easy, and they are not simple, and they cannot be examined from this merely abstract lens. They must be constructed through the active participation in both parties in trying to build a bond that works for the benefit of them both, not merely a material benefit, not merely the benefit of trying to achieve a goal, but the benefit of reaching toward the good, reaching toward all that is aspirational, all that is beyond the utilitarian, coldly functionalist aims of everyday routine. And the process of building that relationship is not something that can be merely glossed over by fusion, and it's not something that requires fusion to happen. What it does require is the steady working to overcome these discrepancies, these lapses in understanding between the two parties that inevitably arise. We get the greatest insight into their relationship in the episode We Need to Talk, one of my favorite episodes in the show. Greg is someone who is still trying to hold on to his old rock star dreams. His parents, as we see later, in great detail, did not want him to pursue this path. They had a very set expectation for him, very rigid and very unrelenting, and he rebelled against that. He is fine not being rich, he is fine not being successful, he has no desire to stumble into this grand cosmic story, and when he is nonetheless wrapped up in it, he accepts it with equanimity. He's not overjoyed, but he's not lamenting it. He deeply misses losing Rose, whom he deeply loved, but he respects her choice, and he attempts to live with the consequences of it. Rose Quartz is, of course, also escaping the diamonds and their power structures and their cold and heartless treatment of her, and their neglecting of her values and the decisions that she wants to make. She wants to be free. It is a naive yearning at first, but it is earnest. One can think of the whole Common People by Pulp dynamic of the rich girl running away from her life and going with someone of lower socioeconomic status and idealizing this life of relative poverty and relative lack of adornments and glamour. And the show does not shy away from depicting the more negative and less healthy aspects of what the relationship is early on. Greg states outright that Rose does not really take him seriously at first. He is fun for her. He is a plaything. She does not treat him like this out of malice. It is simply her natural way of interacting with someone that she is kind of internalized is lesser, even as he is someone who brings her a lot of joy and a lot of excitement. Ultimately, Rose does become more mature, become more thoughtful, become more willing to take responsibility of her own actions. She is not a perfect character by any means, but she deeply cares for her relationships with others. She is willing to fight for those relationships, and that extends to her relationship with Greg. Greg ultimately is willing to help her through this process of growth. He is flawed himself. He is not a brilliant father to Stephen, and he turns so heavily against the parenting techniques of his own father that perhaps he does not give Stephen the support he needs. Nonetheless, the two of them are genuinely committed to making the relationship work. What relationships require, as the show so lucidly demonstrates, is care. The willingness to commit one's time and one's energy to the building of this something new. This creation that is neither Greg nor Rose, but includes them both. It is something new. It is something they have to be willing to commit themselves to, even when it's hard. Steven Universe depicts how challenging that can be, but also how rewarding it can ultimately be to succeed and to have that strong, meaningful connection and relationship. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Go back and rewatch Steven Universe. I would not say it's a perfect show, but it is a unique show. There have been a lot of shows that have come after Steven Universe that have tried to recapture certain elements of what makes the show so popular, but there's a specific tone, a specific lyrical intimacy that the show does very well. So anyway, tune in soon for the next analysis. It will be coming soon. Promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.